Worlds lived and worlds died, and nothing was ever the same. This is the ultimate crossover video on comic book crossovers. Let's dive in. Hey, super friends, Jake here with the Brave and the Boys, and this is my epic comic book crossover in celebration for the DC versus Marvel Omnibus finally releasing. So I called up a bunch of my internet comic book geek friends to all talk about their favorite comic book crossover, and mine, of course, you knew it had to be JLA Avengers, the Absolute Edition. And yes, fight me, it is an Absolute Edition. So the idea for this crossover started back in the 80s, and it took until 2003 for it to finally come out, but it was penned by Kurt Busiek and art masterfully done by the late George Perez, and this is the Absolute Edition that means the most to me in my collection. So it was a gift to me from my wife when I hit a year sober, and now if you're watching this, I'm over 2 years sober, which is amazing. So comic books are a way to make your life better. So this book tells the story of when DC and Marvel worlds collide because of the evil villainous Krona, who wants to seek to understand the mysteries of the universe, even if he has to destroy every universe to do it. The Grandmaster, as he often does, proposes a game with the DC heroes and the Marvel heroes crossing over to collect special items that mean significant things to the universe, and whoever can do it, their universe will survive. You get to see awesome moments because the heroes don't really like each other at first. DC thinks the Marvel heroes have let their world get dark and messed up, and they're like, why don't they save people? The Marvel universe thinks the DC heroes walk around like gods, and they're not very happy with that. And you get to see epic moments such as Thor and Superman clashing, Darkseid putting on the Infinity Gauntlet, and many other moments that are just explosive with like every characters even I can't name, and I have the t-shirt, and it is just epic art, epic story, and these 4 issues are amazing. Now let's give it up to my friends to say their favorite.
Hey, I'm Jordan from The Brave and the Boys, as well as Brave Boys Beyond, and my pick for my favorite crossover is within the pages of Planetary. We have Planetary Batman Night on Earth. Absolutely amazing crossover issue. It is a single issue, I should state. It's not an ongoing series. And the premise of it is that the Planetary team and Batman are both chasing down a potential criminal or someone who doesn't know they're actually committing a crime. And they chase him down into a place where he opens up a vortex by accident, and they get to interact and meet with each other. The most interesting portion of this, though, definitely has to be that as they progress in fighting each other over who's going to take in this criminal, Batman ends up flashing through all his different time periods. So we get to see everything from Silver Age Batman, Neil Adams, Golden Era Batman, and I mean the likes, as well as The Dark Knight Returns. It is an amazing crossover that you definitely have to check it out. And just in general, if you haven't checked out Planetary, go read it. It's definitely worth it. Now, switching on to the next person.
What it do, comic babies? I'm BunkmastaB, and today we teaming up, y'all. So Jake asked me, from the Brave and Boys, to talk about my favorite team up in comics. And I thought for a little while, but honestly, wasn't that hard a choice for me. My favorite is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cross Power Rangers, and specifically Volume 2. Now, this is a series I don't just like. I love this series. You guys already know I'm a huge Power Rangers fan. I grew up with the TMNT. Big fan there. Put them both together, and it's a dream matchup for me. In fact, I love this series so much, I bought not just 1 copy, but 7 copies of issue 1, including one of my absolute favorite covers of all time, this amazing TMNT issue number 1 homage featuring that classic cover, but with the Power Rangers. And it's not just all lip service, too. The expert team of Dan Mora and Ryan Parrott tell a really, really gripping story of the burden that fathers put on their sons, all about, great action sequences, and you get some amazing crossover moments with some great Turtles morphing and Power Rangers becoming mutants. Even if you're not a fan of either franchise, I honestly think there's so much here to love that anybody can pick up this book and enjoy it. First off, it's Dan Moore drawing it. You can't go wrong there. But there's a surprisingly gripping narrative underneath, full of amazing action sequences. You guys know, I love my heady indie series that no one's ever heard of. But for this one, I had to go with my heart. And you don't go better than two of the best.
What's going on? Mitch here from the Omnibuddy channel, and thank you Jake and Jordan from Brave and the Boys for doing this video and putting it together. Love this idea of the crossover event. I typically do not cover books on my channel from Marvel and DC. I do some occasionally, but mostly what I do is the independent book route. So I love Image, Dark Horse, Magnetic Press, all these other books that aren't typically seen. And you know what? For my crossover event, I'm gonna do something probably a little less typical, because it's not really like one comic and another comic. It is a merging of an old Sunday comic strip with a relatively new genre, post-apocalyptic. We are looking at Weapon Brown by Jason Youngbluth. This is Charlie Brown, that whole universe, and actually basically the Sunday Comics universe mixed into a post-apocalyptic nightmare hellscape. It is phenomenal. And you know what? He even did a follow-up to it with Aftershock. These were actually through Kickstarter, and he's looking at reprinting both of these in one giant hardcover edition very soon on Kickstarter. So hopefully that drops soon, because these books are getting pretty difficult to find. But man, if you are looking for a crazy, off-the-wall, post-apocalyptic story that kind of brings back that nostalgia of your childhood of reading those comic strips in the newspaper, this is awesome. I'm going to show you why. Again, so this is Weapon Brown and Aftershock, the follow-up series by Jason Youngbluth. This is basically Charlie Brown in a post-apocalyptic universe, and everything has just gone to crap. And you know what? There are a ton of other Sunday story comic characters in these books, and I'm not going to spoil them, but let's take a look inside. So this is a humorous but also dark and gritty take on what would happen in the Charlie Brown verse if the bombs dropped. Because it was a Sunday afternoon when they came, the birds laid the black eggs. You're introduced right off to the key character, Charlie Brown, as he is fighting off some grotesque characters, and he is just in a apocalyptic hellscape. But you know what? He has some friends along for the ride, and you meet some friends along the way. But man, is this story fun, and the art just absolutely insane. I mean, come on, look at this. You have just this Mad Max meets Walking Dead meets I don't even know what, but man, is this story fun, and it's wacky, and the art supports everything. It is all in black and white, so if that is a deal breaker for you, well, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to deal with it, because this book is phenomenal. So really the entire first half of this book serves to set up the world, build the universe, introduce new characters, and then the second half is really where it takes off, and you deal with the consequences of things that happened and the villains, and you are on a wild, wild ride, and you are really disgusted with some of these characters. It's a fun romp, I gotta admit. It took me a little bit to get into, but hey, once you did, it was phenomenal. There are so many amazing characters in this book, you gotta pay attention, otherwise you miss these little details and Easter eggs. I'm positive I missed out on stuff. But after this story takes place, then you move into Aftershock. It's a short little read, but just kind of continues the idea of who Weapon Brown is and Charlie Brown, and it's a fun little romp, and basically takes place all around a campfire and kind of draws out what happened after the first book. All right, so I hope you're kind of sold on the whole Weapon Brown Aftershock thing. If you want to follow my channel, more than happy to have you. We are a positive, super fun community. We're a small channel, so it's nothing too crazy or anything like that, but I love talking comics with this community and highlighting books that are often just unheard of or don't get enough attention and love. All right, I'll see you guys around.
Hello, Brave and the Boys community. Is your fellow nerd from the Luminerdy YouTube channel, where today I am going to be talking about my favorite comic book crossover, Now, when Jake asked me to be a part of this video, a multitude of crossovers popped into my head, from the DC and Marvel stuff, to Superman and Thundercats, to even the Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, which are all incredible crossovers. But I figured to go with Marvel Team Up issue 14, which is a crossover between Spider-Man and Invincible in the Marvel Universe. Now, we do see a small fraction of this crossover in the Invincible title in issue 13 of Invincible, where we do see Mark come into the house and get teleported away by Angstrom Levy, where he eventually runs into a very familiar set of robotic octopus arms and webbed hands. He then comes back through the portal with webbing on his back, and we don't get much story, at least in the Invincible title. Now, if you want to see what happens between those two portals, then you need to read Marvel Team Up issue 14, where you do get to see the full team up between Invincible and Spider-Man to take down Dr. Octopus. You then eventually do get to see Invincible meet the members of the Avengers and make some not so subtle jabs at the way they look. And then you also get to get some touching scenes between Invincible and Spider-Man, including getting to see just how friendly Spider-Man is, offering his help to Invincible to free his mother, and even going as far as webbing onto Invincible's back, which is why we see the webbing in Invincible issue 33, which obviously Spider-Man does attempt but fail to cross over and help Invincible, but the intent was there. Now, we do also get to see this crossover, at least a version of it, in the Invincible animated series, where we get to see a not so subtle replacement for Spider-Man when Mark flies through Angstrom Levy's portal once again. But we don't get to see the full story again unless you read Marvel Team Up issue 14. So that's the main reason that it's my favorite crossover. It's a issue where you only get this story. It's not collected anywhere else other than this issue, and I love that. I also love the idea of Spider-Man and Invincible teaming up, because despite Spider-Man being around much longer than Invincible, they are both young heroes that are constantly trying to gain their footing as superheroes, and I think both of them and their characteristics lend beautifully to each other, and that is exactly why it's my favorite crossover.
Hey super friends, Gianni here from the Biff Bam Pow podcast over on Spotify. First of all, thank you so much, Jake, for including me in this video. Just excited to be here and talk about my favorite crossover in comics. So my absolute favorite crossover in all of comics is the original Batman versus Predator. If you know me, you know that I'm a huge fan of the Alien and Predator franchises. So if you put a Predator and you throw Batman in there, I'm gonna love it. So this is a 3-issue limited series that is written by Dave Gibbons, who is the artist on Watchmen, and drawn beautifully by Andy Kubert with inks by Adam Kubert. It's just a stacked creative team here. And it's basically just your typical Batman story, where Batman, he's just fighting some organized crime. And like every great Predator story, it uses the Predator formula, where about halfway through the story, the Predator is thrown in like a monkey wrench and just disrupts the whole narrative. And it becomes Batman fighting the ultimate hunter, the Predator. And yeah, I absolutely love this thing. Like I said, it's 3 issues. And if you've heard of this story, you probably know the iconic Predator fighting armor that Batman wears. Here's just a beautiful, my favorite page from this story. Just this beautiful artwork by Adam and Andy Kubert. And yeah, so this trade paperback, unfortunately, is very out of print, but it's pretty easy to find. I got this copy at my local comic book store for about like $5. I've seen this out in the wild for really cheap at conventions and just comic book stores that I've been to. And if you can't find the collected edition, the single issues are always in dollar bins. Really easy to find. Again, 3 issues. I absolutely love Batman vs. Predator. And yeah.
All right, so I got to take a quick break from editing because my man Jake wants me to tell you about my favorite crossover or team up in comics. By the way, I'm BJ Kicks from Comics Are Dope over there. So follow my channel if you haven't already. That'd be cool. So I got to talk about my favorite crossovers. And you know, I'm never going to join anybody's top 10 list without shouting out Milestone, my favorite little comics imprint, right? And so Milestone actually has both crossovers and team ups with the DC universe. So they had a 14-part crossover with the DC Superman office in an event called Worlds Collide, which is actually collected in this. This is Milestone Compendium Volume 2. So Milestone Compendium 2, you can grab at Organic Price Books. And it has my favorite crossover technically. But with this, like Icon and the Blood Syndicate and Static, they team up with Superman and Superboy and all that, right? And Steel. And so like they have their little crossover story, and that's all cool. But the way it's done is done in a way where the universes are separate from each other. And when the event is over, nobody really remembers that it even happened, right? So it's a cool crossover, but it's not my favorite crossover involving Milestone and DC. That would technically be this team up. This is Justice League of America. This story arc is called When Worlds Collide. So Milestone co-founder Dwayne McDuffie actually, after writing a bunch of successful seasons of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, was given the opportunity to write the Justice League of America comic. He was following up Brad Meltzer's run after the Lightning Saga and all that. And so he was poised for a nice long run on the title. And what he did was introduce the Milestone characters into the proper DC universe. Now, Static isn't in this. Static was actually like having some adventures with the Teen Titans and stuff. But this finds the Shadow Cabinet coming head to head, face to face with the Justice League. So Icon, Hardware, Donner and Blitzen, Twilight, Flashback, like just amazing. Payback. There's Payback right there. But just they all meet up with the Justice League. And of course, it wouldn't be a superhero team up if they didn't fight before they teamed up. And what I love about this has one of my favorite moments. There's a moment in this book where Icon comes in and punches Superman, and and they start the fight and all that. And we find out that Icon and Superman sort of staged the fight and they had been friends the whole time. But Superman says, yo, you actually like kind of hurt me there. And so it's just a fun acknowledgement that Icon is just as powerful as Superman. But what I love about this, why I love it so much, is the Milestone characters. They came with really stylized art back in the 90s. There was like watercolors by Noel Giddings, and each artist that worked on Milestone titles had a really distinct style that was different from like the sort of house style that we got in the 90s for a lot of people. But what this does, this gives us the Milestone characters, and it gives us the Milestone characters drawn by Ed Benez. So, the master of like just big action poses and, bodacious women and all that, right? He's drawing Hardware and Icon and Rocket and Shadowcat. Like just that is a sight to behold. Let me actually turn to a page where they all are here. So you can see what I'm talking about. But I absolutely love seeing these Milestone characters as depicted by Ed Benez. Like, look how big and muscular Icon is sitting there with big muscular Superman. And it goes on and on. Look at the action in this pages. Look at Hardware over there. Like that's really the show. Oh, here's that moment where Icon punches Superman. So that's really like, I love this for that reason. Like just seeing them with one of the top artists in the game, at a time where we didn't think we were going to see these characters again in comics when Milestone imploded back in the late 90s. So to see this in the mid 2000s was just amazing. So Justice League of America, When Worlds Collide, my favorite comic book team up.
Thank you, Jake, for letting us be part of this awesome crossover event. We're Afifthofjack Gaming, where we end up covering comic books, Magic the Gathering, specifically the Commander/EDH, and we have a little bit of video game live play that we end up playing. But back to the topic of choice is crossovers. So with our crossover, it has an awesome premise. What's that premise? Well, it's the real world, and what would happen if, boop, a bubble came over with the comic book world being in there, mixing the real world with the comic book world. Well, it happened in Donny Cates' wonderful series called The Crossover. It's called The Crossover Event, where this ended up happening. This currently has 2 different volumes, but it never ended up getting finished, which we never know if it will. Hopefully it does. But as soon as Jake came over and was talking about crossover events, this is the one that I couldn't get out of my mind because, well, it's perfect, but a crossover that has a lot of different crossovers. So buckle up and stay tuned for the entire ride. So this is going to be covering the first volume, and then we might have some shenanigans in between. We have a nice little voiceover of what's going to be found inside. We find ourselves with that fallout from that crossover event of seeing the population against the superheroes and the comic world, and over to the big comic book store. This is where we meet a few characters of the big story that we end up having, and also one character that ends up making it where she's trying to get back over to the bubble over in Denver, Colorado, to get back with her family. Look at all these crossovers. You have Batman, I believe Wonder Woman, The Thing, a bunch of other ones that's hinted over towards it. Spawn, Spider-Man, oh man. We end up seeing the comic book store catch it on fire and exposing the first villain that we end up seeing, and an interesting character that may end up going through a character development throughout this entire story. The crossover doesn't only end there, because we also get influenced by different comic book artists/writers. In this one, we end up finding the fate of Brian K. Vaughan. We end up finding out about others of the media, that they are being hunted out for dealing with anything that comes outward from this comic book world, being a fallout from that. Whoa. We gotta take a break right here. The Volvax can be found in this book. It's another book by Donny Cates and Jeffrey Saul. So it's another way you can end up reading and get a little bit more background with it. During this volume of the crossover, we also get a bunch of characters that it ends up being that they give thanks for. Characters such as Savage Dragon from Eric Larson, Incorruptible from Mark Wade, and Mark Allred's Madman, to list a few of them. As the story comes over an end, we end up finding out what's a twist with it, and we get a shocking realization at the end of the book. Before we start breaking down book 2, beware, there may be some more graphic experience that you'll be seeing in this book, so viewers' discretion will be advised. Our story starts back up with Chip Zdarsky being the focal point of that, having a nice little protector of himself in the comic book world, and then we end up seeing what ends up happening with him, and he runs into the Powers, which is by Brian Michael Bendis. Then we jump back over and to be caught up with what happened in the story so far. Got a nice little refresher. If you didn't end up reading the previous volume, this is where you'll end up getting a quick synopsis breakdown of that previous volume. We end up having our heroines get arrested by the Powers team, where that ends up being over and taken to the realization that the villain of the story, well, the main villain, won't talk to anyone but his son. Dun, 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 dun. And then the Powers are continuing because we ended up seeing more of the comic book writers ended up getting taken out in the process of the storyline that comes along with it. And needless to say, down the road we end up seeing actually Donny Cates make a make his presence, and then he kind of ends up taking over the story, trying to explain the story that goes along with it, and how that this entire story isn't your typical story, because it's supposed to be a love story the entire time. There's a lot of action towards the end of this book, and we get left with a big cliffhanger setting up for the next volume. Dun 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 dun. That ends up wrapping that little crossover that we ended up having. This is one of the better crossovers, and immediately when Jay came over with the idea of this topic, this was the book that came into mind. Now, it's important to say that this isn't quite yet finished. This was before, I believe, when Kate had his accident and all that, so we never know if this will actually get completely wrapped up. I hope it does. But however, this does or did come out with some gimmicky covers that you ended up having. You had some 3D covers and such as that. It's another nice way to be able to enjoy it. And like I said, if you want to read it yourself, you have these two different trades that you can end up picking up, or you can end up going over to Hoopla to be able to read it from there. Thank you, Jake, for this awesome idea and letting us participate into this little thing. Let's continue the train of crossover action with whoever's next.
Hey, super friends from the Brave and the Boys. This is Andre from the BIFF. Jake asked me if I would help him out with a little video of my favorite team up or crossover. Yeah, so here we are. I picked up the Batman TMNT Omnibus because they are my all-time favorite characters, and I had a lot of fun reading it. So what's happening in the book? In Gotham, mysterious portals open up and bringing the turtles from their dimension into Batman's world. And as they get to know each other, they must face Shredder, Ra's al Ghul, Joker, Bane, and Krang, all mixed up in the different dimensions. A lot of chaos, but also a lot of fun, because the interactions between Batman and the Turtles are really funny and thrilling. Because Mikey, for example, brings up some comedy to the dark atmosphere in Gotham, while Leonardo tries to keep up the team focused. And Batman, as you all know, is more the serious guy, very, very funny. In the epic finale, Batman and the Turtles manage to defeat the threat and restore balance between the different dimensions. So, what's my conclusion? It's an action-packed and entertaining book that delights fans of both franchises. It has something about 400 pages of story, and then all the cool different variants and covers. Yeah, I had a lot of joy reading it, and Kawabanga. Enjoy the rest of the video.
Heyo, it's Omnidog from Omnidog's Vault. Thank you to Jake from the Brave and the Boys asking me to participate in our favorite crossovers. Now, my favorite crossover is a crossover that's kind of a crossover. It's sort of important and also not important, which makes it weird, which makes it something I love. I'm talking about, of course, Stormwatch. Now, Stormwatch volumes 1 and 2, previous to this, has been available only these two hardcovers. I'm going to get to certain things in just a sec, so just hold on. It's only available in these two hardcovers. There is a compendium coming out in January, I believe, of 2025 that puts both of these together. And in Stormwatch, we meet the team of Stormwatch, various characters, that you grow to find interesting. And the reason to read this is because it leads into one of my favorite books ever, The Authority. Do you have to read Stormwatch to enjoy Authority? No. Is it a fun book, Stormwatch? And will it help you a little bit with the authority? Yeah. So here's the crossover part that's so weird about this. This took place in the Wildstorm universe originally, then DC, which is Image, and DC bought Wildstorm out and brought Jim Lee aboard. So you learn about, here's Jack Hawksmoor. You'll learn about Apollo, Midnighter, Jenny Sparks, all kinds of interesting people. And Stormwatch goes back further than this. This is just where I chose to start reading Stormwatch because this is where I think it's really good. So you've got volume 1. Then you've got volume 2. And you're reading volume 2 and you're like, okay, cool, Stormwatch, the bleed, you're doing a bunch of cool things. I can dig it. Then you get to issue 10 and read it. And then you get to issue 11, the last book issue in this book. That's a bunch of gravestones. Stormwatch, half the team's been killed. There's no explanation for it. They're like playing taps in a mass grave for all these people that on Stormwatch that have died. And then all of a sudden at the end, spoiler alert, Jenny Sparks comes in with Shen and Jack Hawksmoor saying, well, we have to form a new authority. And you're like, what the heck is going on? 1 minute we're aboard the space station up at doing Stormwatch stuff. And the next, half the team's dead. Here's the crossover that's so goofy. It's Wildcats Aliens from Dark Horse and Image and Wildstorm. So you've got 3 IP holders, and to my knowledge, this has only been reprinted once in a Stormwatch trade paperback, and I think that thing's way out of print. In this book, I'm going to tell you what it is so you can buy Stormwatch, read it, and go on to enjoy the authority because it's fun. In this book, Stormwatch up there orbiting encounters aliens. The aliens break through into Stormwatch because they think it's a asteroid. They land transport ships on it to check it out, science ships really, to check it out. Blah, 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 blah. Somehow aliens and Palpatine, no, not Palpatine, are on board the station that Stormwatch is on. So Earth decides to send up Wildcats to save them. Well, mayhem ensues because this life form is nothing that these people have encountered before on Wildcats. You'll see Grifter there. Something Grifter survives. And yeah, it's a whole thing. This is what happens. This is like issue 10 and a half. It's what happens between issue 10 when they encounter the asteroid and issue 11 when half the team's dead and the UN says, we can't afford Stormwatch anymore. We're shutting it down. What? Yeah, this is the issue. Now I've checked and it's available on eBay. When I got this, I don't know, 10 years ago, it was $5. People are asking way too much, but if you look at it sold on eBay, you can get it for $10. It's not going to be in the upcoming Stormwatch compendium. So you have 2 choices. You can wait it. You can get the Stormwatch compendium and go on and read Authority. Actually, you've got 3 choices. Don't bother with Stormwatch in this issue and just read Authority. That might be the cleanest thing to do because this book kicks ass and is great. Option 2, get the Stormwatch compendium that does not have this. Look at my video and say, oh, that's what happens between issue 10 and 11, and go on to read Authority. Or what's the third option? Don't even worry about, buy this for no more than $10 on eBay with the Stormwatch compendium that's come out. There's 3 choices and I've already confused myself. The most important thing is to read Authority because it's great. If you choose to read Stormwatch, you can or cannot, it's up to you, buy this for don't pay more than $10. It explains things. Stormwatch is a fun compendium. Without it, I'm just telling you what happens. You may not even need it, but don't pay for the overpriced trade paperback or the single issue. Just know Wildcats, something, 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 aliens, half the team's dead. Jenny Sparks takes over. Boom, authority. Thank you to Jake, Pete for inviting me. Peace and love. Right on, baby. Peace and love, peace and love. And I am Omnidog from Omnidog's Vault on YouTube. Please subscribe, like, hit the bell. Feel free to comment whenever you see my videos. Thank you so much. Peace and love.
Hello, it is Taylor of the Taylor Talks Comics YouTube channel. I want to thank Jake so much for inviting me into this project, this giant crossover event of all of the great comic YouTubers. It's a privilege to be amongst this crowd. So I am Taylor. My YouTube channel is called Taylor Talks Comics. Over there, I do a lot of the Marvel DC Omnibus overviews like you see on other channels. But I hope that you subscribe for that reason, but stay for the more obscure independent titles that I cover as well. A lot of stuff from Fangraphics, self-published comics from people that are making comics and just publishing them themselves and sending them out themselves, and Dark Horse, Image, but also more obscure independents like John and Quarterly and that kind of stuff. But also I cover some older comics too, some Golden Age, Silver Age comics. Those are some of my interest as well. So please subscribe over there. I am on the road to 3,000 subscribers. That's one of my goals for the end of the year, and you guys can help me out with that. So Jake said he wants us to pick a crossover comic book to show off for you guys. And today I'm going to be showing off the time that Godzilla and Charles Barkley got into a one-on-one basketball game. I'm going to flip the camera around and put this under the microscope so you can see a little bit closer of this awesome, hilarious crossover event for the 90s. Okay, so this is typically how I show off my comics on my channel, is I say under the microscope here to get a close view of what's going on in the comic. This is put out by Dark Horse Comics back in the 90s, and this is Godzilla versus Barkley. It was inspired by a commercial, actually, where Godzilla and Charles Barkley went on in a one-on-one game. You can look up that commercial on YouTube. It's quite funny. But in here you can see, read in awe as Godzilla battles Charles Barkley in a cataclysmic game of hoops, the likes of which has never been witnessed by man. And we open it up here. It's written by Mike Barron, who wrote Flash comics, as well as Nexus and Badger. The plot was by Alan Smithy, Jeff Butler on pencils. I'm not familiar with Jeff Butler or Keith Aiken on art duties, but Mike Barron I do know. So it starts off with these guys on this boat here, and then great image of Godzilla just busting through, people falling out of the boat. When I love kaiju comics and Godzilla comics, you'll see a lot of those on my channel as well. And then this guy finds this lucky coin, and it leads to this little kid encountering Godzilla himself, him and his dad. You see all these great airplanes shooting at Godzilla, trying to get him off the shore. Great panel right here of Godzilla just shooting his, what is that, the laser breath? What is that? I don't know. At the airplane. And then this kid meets Charles Barkley. And he's with his entourage here. This kid, of course, is very 90s, so he has to be on a skateboard going off the ramp. And then Charles Barkley catches him. And then he tells him, but Charles, only you can stop Godzilla because you're the Earth's greatest warrior. And he's like, maybe you have a point there. I can't do a Charles Barkley impression, but I love Charles Barkley. He's one of my favorite basketball players. He's one of my favorite analysts of basketball too. I feel like he's one of the few analysts these days of basketball that gives an honest opinion that doesn't seem like it's bogged down by any sort of agenda. But anyways, that's my basketball speech for you guys. So he finds this coin, and this coin makes him grow into Kaiju Charles. Kaiju round mound of rebound. Sir Charles. Kaiju version of Chuck here. So that he can fight Godzilla. And he says, "Hey, sorry, suitcase-looking sucker. I'm talking to you." And he bounces the basketball off of Godzilla's head. And then they find a skyscraper with a hoop around it. And Charles turns it into a basketball hoop. And says, "Hey, let's not fight. Let's go one-on-one." So he challenges Godzilla to a one-on-one game. seeing Godzilla with a basketball, shooting a jump shot. It's just hilarious stuff. And then this 2-page spread is really the best part of the whole comic, I think. I don't know. You see Charles going around Godzilla, shooting a jumper here. Godzilla's confused, so his head's looking both ways. He elbows him in the head and then dunks it. Charles was known for being a dirty player, if you will, back in the day. So the elbow to the head is very apropos. But again, this was a Nike commercial, so you got to put the Nike sneakers in there, showing off Charles's sneakers. And then they're talking trash. So Godzilla melts the basketball. And then they walk off. And Charles is like, "Okay, Godzilla lost." But then look at this. Charles, in the ultimate act of sportsmanship, gives Godzilla some of his own Nike shoes. And then here's my favorite panel of this whole comic. Godzilla got busy with his sneakers, going for a nice little finger roll layup there. And then that's the end. This is so I do show off some of these obscure comics sometimes on my channel, and I like to go over all the ephemera. This is noteworthy because this is the Legend imprint of Dark Horse. And back in the day when this was around, it was around the time that Image Comics came out. A couple years after Image became a thing. And this was an imprint of Dark Horse that had Art Adams, John Byrne, Paul Chadwick, Jeff Darrow, Dave Gibbons, Mike Mignola, Frank Miller, and then Mike Allred would eventually join the group as well. So it's kind of like their version of Image. But the Legend imprint didn't last as long, and it didn't really come to fruition as much as they really wanted it to. But we do see some of the titles that, just to put this comic book in a time period. Danger Unlimited was John Byrne's kind of version of the Fantastic Four, kind of his independent version of them. Sin City, we have t-shirts, postcards. So this is when Sin City was first coming out. This is Art Adams' Monkey Man and O'Brien comic, which is really fun to look at. X-Men was John Byrne's X-Men comic. Catalyst Agents of Change. Grendel Tales. This was Matt Wagner's story. And then The Finish Line. Here's a letter from the editor, Ryder Wyndham, which I don't think he... Yeah, there's nothing in this editorial about the Charles Barkley Godzilla, but it is interesting because he does talk about the whole thing's about having minority characters as at the forefront of the comics and minority creators and whatnot. And it's kind of interesting because there's a comparison from George Harriman to Rob Liefeld. George Harriman is Crazy Cat, Crazy Ignat's comic creator from the early newspaper strips, the early 1900s, and it was super famous and amazing cartoonist. So comparing him to Rob Liefeld is just interesting, and I don't know that you'll find many places where those two are even uttered in the same sentence like this. And then that's the back of it. So yeah, that's Godzilla versus Barkley. One of my favorite fun obscure crossovers from back in the day. Thank you so much, Jake, for inviting me on here. Everybody, please go subscribe to Taylor Talks Comics and subscribe to all the other comic book YouTubers on this video. Really, we all do make an effort to show off comics, and it's the medium that we love, and all of us could use your help and your support. So make sure you go through the list in the description down below that Jake has and subscribe to each of the channels. It doesn't take you much time, and it goes a long way for all of us book YouTubers.
Hey everyone, this is Dominic from the Comic Book Report YouTube channel, over here doing this epic crossover video with the Brave and the Boys. Hey everyone, I'm so honored to be here on the channel, but let's get right to it. I know Jake prompted me with what is your favorite crossover of all time, and frankly, I'm not sure that this is my favorite crossover at all time, so I'm already immediately tweaking what I was asked to do, sorry, but this is one of the most recent crossovers I've read, and I was stunned by it. I absolutely loved it. It is already amongst my favorites, I would say. So we're going to be talking today about Predator versus Wolverine. This came out from Marvel not too long ago, and this is an absolute blast. Written by Benjamin Percy, who's recently penned the Wolverine and X-Force over at Marvel during that Krakoa era, amongst other things. We have incredible artwork throughout this collection as well by a bunch of different artists, including one of my favorites, Ken Lashley. His Wolverine is just so visceral, epic, detailed, and it just pops right from the page. Giving you a quick look at the spine for this collection, Predator vs. Wolverine. I like the kind of yellowed font. It really just pop from that darker background we have on it. So this is from 20th Century and Marvel, but yeah, really, really fun stuff in this book. Obviously, Wolverine is a Marvel property, and Predator began, I believe, as a film franchise, if I'm not mistaken, although he is not shy to the comic book medium. There's been tons of Predator comic books over the years. I think Marvel currently has the rights to all of that, which is why we've seen those Predators, early year omnibuses that have come out, and then books like this. Okay, and now after we finish that back cover look there, let's go ahead and jump into the collection proper. So this is a standard size trade paperback with nice glossy print paper stock, a glued binding, and the full 4-issue miniseries, obviously Predator vs. Wolverine. So this came out just within the last year or two. I remember I was so excited when I heard this announced. I knew I would have to check it out when the trade paperback came out. There is currently no hardcover release for this miniseries. There's just the paperback. This is the Barnes & Noble exclusive cover, so there are 2 covers, I guess, for the paperback, but yep, no hardcover yet. But yeah, so this miniseries is exactly what it sounds like. It's Predator versus Wolverine. But what I really like about it is how they set it up. This is a classic example of a frame narrative. We basically have Benjamin Percy writing this whole tale, and the frame narrative artwork is provided by Ken Lashley. Now, the setup for the story in the present day is basically Wolverine is being hunted by Predator. He's injured. He's kind of on his last breaths here, trying to evade and trying to get on the offensive, try to get the upper hand again. And while he is fighting the Predator, running away, trying to get tactical, we are treated to flashbacks that occur throughout Wolverine's life when he's encountered this same Predator over the last, I don't know, maybe 100 years. But what I love about how this story is constructed is that each flashback has a different artist. Again, Ken Lashley is providing the overall frame narrative artwork, so he does all the present day Wolverine Predator stuff, but each flashback has a different distinct artist, which I thought was such a masterstroke. Throughout this book, we jump back to different time periods for Wolverine, before the Weapon X program, during, and after. I think for longer-term fans of Wolverine, you might be pretty excited to see some of the little episodes we get in these flashbacks. I know I certainly was, but I think if you're a brand new Wolverine reader, and you maybe are coming for the Predator, you're going to enjoy it just as well. I think this book is so accessible to new readers, but certainly there's plenty of fun Easter eggs if you're an individual fan of either franchise group, and if you're a fan of it all like me, this was just a real thrill ride. As I said, this is a 4-issue miniseries, but I think it was extraordinarily well paced. It was so much action and just excitement. I will say there is quite a bit of violence, blood, gore, so if you are a younger reader or you're sensitive to those things, just please be aware of that. But I thought the storytelling was excellent. I will say I am a fan of Benjamin Percy's Wolverine run, so I really think he already has the voice of this character down, or at least it's an interpretation that I personally enjoy. And you definitely have a lot of that bleed through with this work. But like I said, from the Predator side as well, there's a lot of fun Easter eggs and immediately recognizable customizable Predator-isms, seeing some of their tech, the way they operate, the character models, all of that. It's all here, and it's honestly pretty fantastic. I don't want to spoil the story for you though. Suffice it to say, it is great and I loved the resolution, but I also enjoyed every step of the way. An epic crossover to be sure, and honestly, my hat's off to everyone over at Marvel for making this epic event happen. And that is Predator vs. Wolverine. Huge thank you to Jake, Jordan, the Brave and the Boys for this invitation. I consider it an absolute honor. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Hello to the Brave and the Boys and their audience. My name is Chris and I host a comic book show called ComicTropes. Jake asked me, what's my favorite crossover? And there have been a lot of great crossovers, to be honest, but the one I kept coming back to, and maybe it's nostalgia speaking, but my favorite is the Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans. That was 1982, Marvel and DC, and at the time, X-Men and Teen Titans were both ridiculously popular. Pretty much the most popular team book for each of the big two. And why not? They had a killer artist-writer team on both of them. X-Men had Chris Claremont and John Byrne, and New Teen Titans had Marv Wolfman and George Perez. So, for their crossover in '82, Chris Claremont wrote, and they got Walt Simonson to illustrate. And Simonson is always one of my favorite artists. He's also a great writer, but just a great artist. And the fun of this issue is that they don't bother with anything like, oh, I've come into a parallel world. That would be a waste of storytelling time. They just both exist in the same world. That's all there is to it. It shortens everything. The villains of the piece are all the best ones. Darkseid, Deathstroke the Terminator, and the Dark Phoenix. And the plot is kind of simple, but it allows for all of the characters to get a lot of time to shine and work in interesting combinations. Basically, Darkseid is looking to rebuild the Dark Phoenix from all this energy, and he thinks that that will help him, crack the source, and he'll be able to figure out the anti-life equation. That's always his motivation. And to that end, he basically just hires Deathstroke the Terminator to capture all the teams. Then they have to team up to work together and defeat the villain. It's a lot of fun. It looks fantastic. Just one of the most fun and bombastic and dynamic team-ups I can think of. There was supposed to be a sequel, but unfortunately, behind-the-scenes stuff, it's a whole story. It all fell apart. But we still have this story. It's one and done. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it.
What's going on, all you man? Nope, wrong channel. How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, and I am wearing a suit today because, well, I'm not breaking any news. I'm just going to state the obvious. Jake, big thank you to you for letting me be a part of this. You wanted to know what my favorite crossover in comics was. And let me tell you, this is difficult. Reading comics for so many years, you have so many favorites. Predator. I guess that's Batman and Predator had a kid. Anyway, that's a different story. Predator and Batman 2. That's actually one that I love. X-Men and Star Trek. I mean, when else are you going to see a Vulcan give Wolverine the Vulcan neck pinch drawn by Mark Silvestri? Not anywhere else. But I had to go with my heart of hearts, and it has to be the X-Men New Teen Titans. Darkseid, Dark Phoenix, X-Men New Teen Titans, Walter Simonson on art. Oh, of course, that's the one. It has to be from my two favorite publishers going at each other's throats, and no holds barred. It's the first time they met, about the only time they really meet the both teams together. Both of them at the peak of their sales. Oh, what a time to be alive. And it's coming out in omnibus format for the first time. So, absolutely. I won't give away what happens, who ends up winning. But that doesn't really matter because in the end, who wins are the fans. So, thank you, Jake, from the Brave and the Boys. But that was my choice.